Friends and folks, welcome to the Kaiju Lounge, your home for humor, opinions, and nerd shit. I'm your boss, Monster Noah Waterman, and my guest tonight is a writer, author, cocktail consultant, and host of Bar Cart Bookshelf on YouTube, where he pairs amazing literary finds with deliciously inventive cocktails. His latest book is Cocktails and Consoles, 75 video game-inspired drinks to level up your game night, and is on shelves now as of the time this airs. And available, here's a little sneak sip.
I am going to be making one of the very first cocktails that I made for the book. This is the Mario Garita, inspired by the most iconic video game character, the most recognizable video game character in the history of the industry, in the history of the art form. We all know Mario. And so without any further ado, why don't we get started with 1 ounce of tequila in the bottom of our glass, in the bottom of our shaker. And we'll let that go there because there really is a better first step, and that's to rim the edge of our glass, because I like a little salt on the rim of my margarita. If you don't, feel free to skip this step.
Please welcome my guest tonight, Elias Eells. Elias, how are you doing?
Doing all right. How about yourself?
Good. I'm, in honor of you, I'm going to lie and say this is water. So,
well, I think
feeling fantastic.
You got a little something in a glass, then you're in the right place. Now, this is,
there we go.
Non-alcoholic. This one is a mocktail. But, I think at the end of the day, we all want a good little drink. And, whatever you have in it, all the better.
Well, let me ask, what do you have in that mocktail? Asking the mixologist here.
This is one of the recipes in the book. It's the Wii Tennis Cooler. It's going to be pineapple, ginger ale, or ginger beer, lime juice, passion fruit, orange bitters. Just really refreshing, it's that last gasp of summer here. And so a nice little highball. It's a sort of more elevated version of another drink in the book, which is the Pong Punch, because the wheat tennis is, of course, a sort of more elevated version of the same idea behind classic Pong. So getting to play with that idea of how can we look at the arc of a genre was a fun little moment in creating some of these recipes here.
This is great, and I want to get into all of that because there's definitely some layers to what you've made in some of these and just what you've sort of sneaked to the audience, these peaks before the book is launched. Clarification, the book will be out by the time we are showing this. It is launching in just a handful of days by the time we are filming this. But let's get into it from just the top level. Elias, what is Cocktails and Consoles?
Yeah, Cocktails and Consoles is a cocktail book, a mixology book, sort of in the tradition of Tequila Mockingbird. This book that I think came out about 10 years ago. A lot of people know it. It sort of came at the beginning of this cocktail renaissance that we saw over the last, decade, and had all recipes inspired by classic works of literature. This takes that same idea and applies it to the wonderful world of video games. So going back to, the very beginnings with Colossal Cave Adventure, with some of these, text-based games and really classic arcade titles, and then coming right on forward to things that were released as recently as last fall, including the Assassins Creed that was out last October, set in medieval Baghdad. And then looking at games across a wide array of genres and styles and creating cocktails and mocktails that are based on those games. So things that tie into the history of when the game came out, things that tie into like the consumables that you have in a game, all sorts of things like that. There was a lot of different avenues of inspiration. And then there are party tips and snacks, a couple of snacks, some trivia from the world of bar lore and from the world of video games, and just all sorts of little Easter eggs. And of course, it's beautifully illustrated by the wonderful Solji Lee. It's just like when I saw the illustrations, uh, all those little details. One of the things that her art style is known for is all these little details. And so there are all the wonderful little Easter eggs and places where I was able to say, oh, this is one of my favorites. Can we add this, little element? And we were able to do that. And so I think folks who are fans of a lot of these games are going to find, an enjoyment and a real pleasure not only in the recipes, but also in the illustrations that we add for them as well.
That's great, and I love that you bring up the little details, because the thing I've noticed in just what's been kind of released out so far in the book is the level of detail you put into considering the drinks. Now, as someone who is both a big cocktail fan, an amateur mixologist, if you will, as well as a lifelong video game fan, oftentimes I run into, and there's a lot of fun stuff out there, both from barcades and just people who are trying to get gaming inspired cocktail stuff on the internet. The stuff out there, how do I best put this? Tends to be surface level, and it tends to be a little clubby. What ends up happening is I've got a couple like nerdy cocktail books, and okay, here's a drink that's blue, so we're going to call it the TARDIS. Right, like the level of this just pure surface level. And in hearing you talk about, I think for example, the Oregon Trail Buck you put on your channel, Bark Bookshelf, there is a lot more reasoning behind the ingredients you're using. And even now, just talking about Pong and Wii Tennis, tying those together and such and creating inspiration. Was that a big part of putting this book together, to make sure there was that level of, for lack of a better term, craft into designing and not just making it a surface level attachment?
Yeah. I wanted a book that was going to be useful to people who were just getting started in making cocktails, because, we're going to have a lot of folks who are really, groovy gamers, but are maybe just getting into this new hobby as well. And then folks who are sort of a lot more experienced, because people who pick up one nerdy hobby have a tendency to accumulate them. And so I know there are
Yep,
a
no,
lot.
that's fair. That's valid.
Yeah. I know there are a lot of folks who are going to, be into this and have a really good time with it, who have already made a lot of the classic cocktails, who know their way around an old fashioned, who, can shake or stir a martini depending on their mood. And so I wanted to give a book that would be satisfying to all of those people. And some of my background is in classic mixology. I ran a cocktail supply shop as an ecom manager and floor manager for a number of years, that really dealt with the craft of cocktails and all of that like classic cocktail sort of material. And so I could not avoid bringing that sort of detail and expertise, because it's what I do also every week on Bar Cart Bookshelf. The series is sort of founded on close reading. And I think, if we value our works of art, our books and our video games, then we sort of owe them the courtesy of paying attention, and trying to do something that's, serious and detail oriented.
Wow. Yeah. No, absolutely. It's good to the love shines through, which I think is very important here.
Thank you.
Let's go back to the beginning. And speaking of love, what was Elias's first love that brought him to the dance here? Was it cocktails, gaming, or books?
Well, eh, so there were some games that I played as a child. I loved
Hmm.
Adventure Quest, Zoo Tycoon 2, Age of Mythology, things like that.
Yes.
But it wasn't such a big part of my growing up. It wasn't something that my parents were super into, and so it didn't feature as much in my childhood as in some others. Books certainly did. And then cocktails, my senior year of college, I really started to get, more seriously into making cocktails. I was not an underage drinker. I was a rigid rule bound sort of
You
young person.
you waited your turn. You waited to the appropriate limit. Like I'm sure everyone listening absolutely is.
Yes, all things in moderation, including moderation. And when I took to it, I took to it. And it just became a real passion of mine. And then I went to graduate school, and I was going to, do classics and do all the work of being a scholar of ancient Greek. And in summer of 2019, when I was living up in Boston, I needed a job because I wasn't going to be a teaching assistant over the summer. And so I started at this little cocktail supply shop, the Boston Shaker, where I became very serious about cocktails. And then a pandemic hit. And this sort of part-time job really took on a larger role in my life, and became something that I was really much more heavily involved with in keeping the business going, and then just as, being my employer. Um, and in the midst of that, I started to do some bookish cocktails, just off and on, because we were all doing like pandemic-y. We're gonna try some stuff. Um,
Right.
and eventually some friends sat me down and said, "You have to do this in a more serious way. You have to do this in a more dedicated way." Um, and I listened to them. And then Bar Cart Bookshelf came about, and I, further honed my craft in this sort of adaptation space and this close reading space. And then all of a sudden, book came along, and there was this wonderful opportunity to apply the fact that also in the pandemic, I played all six of the mainline Ace Attorney games and the Miles Edgeworth spin-offs. And,
Oh
I had
boy.
all of this sort of in the back of my brain, and was able to apply it and, make good use of that, along with, many of the other games that I have grown to be fond of since childhood. So, really a combination of factors, but certainly at the beginning, these books and close reading, probably.
Totally get that. Totally get that. So that a lot of that leads to, and you described, the pandemic hobby and bringing in
Mm.
Bar Cart Bookshelf. Let's get into that a little bit because you've been at that for a bit now, and I discovered and introduced you through mutual friend Elijah Conspector, the author of Clean of the Soothsayer, which you've also featured on Bar Cart Bookshelf, with a very lovely cocktail I did have to try to make for myself, and talk a bit about what that process has been. How long have you been at doing Bar Cart right now?
Yeah, so we just celebrated the 3-year anniversary in
All
July.
right.
So we're here in the mix of year 4, which is sort of wild to think about. It's a lot of books and a lot of drinks, but it's still very rewarding. And, it gives me the opportunity to celebrate people whose work I really admire and enjoy. Like Elijah's, I just got an advance copy of his second book, Kalina the Cutthroat, which I'm very excited
Yeah.
to. It's going to be a lot of fun. And it's one that we'll be talking about when that arrives in November the 26th. And so it's a very fun sort of thing. It's been an opportunity to meet a lot of people, to become, better friends with folks like Elijah or, other Erewhon authors, people who are local to me here in Kentucky, like the wonderful, Lee Mandello, who I'll be chatting with. Well, who I will have chatted with as of this
Yes.
airing for the
The joy
release.
of the internet, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a real gift to be able to read people's work closely and think deeply about it and to make something celebratory.
That's great. How's that been jumping into that world? As someone who is, a reader, but primarily you're coming from professionally from the bar supply and the cocktail side. How's it been coming in, and what has been the general reception, not just of the authors you've covered, but of the industry? It
Yeah.
sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't Cocktails and consoles happens partly and due to the work you've been doing here at Bar Cart Bookshelf and being able to kind of tie a lot of that together. How is that sort of acceptance into the, because there's no one else is really doing this like
Yeah.
you are right now.
It's it's been a journey. It's definitely more niche
Mm-hmm.
than a lot of the sort of bookish content that you see online. And so there's been a bit of a curve associated with that, but it's more importantly been a way of building community. Um, because it's just something that, authors, I know, maybe it's lucky that I've chosen the authors that I've chosen to cover, but I don't know anyone who's sort of been upset or peeved about having been featured in what I do. And many many
You gotta be
folks.
a special kind of someone to be upset about getting a cocktail named after your book. Like that seems like the highest of honors,
Yeah.
right?
And I try to do the research as well to see, because some people, of course, don't drink, and we make a lot of mocktails as well. So I always try to do the research to make something that an author can enjoy as well, to sort of hit in
Right.
that space of the text and the self. But it can be hard to find the audience for it just out in the world. But that's okay because it's such a joy to do. And it is sort of directly responsible for getting to create cocktails and consoles because in, oh, I guess December, right around the holidays of 2022, a good friend of mine, one of my closest friends, S.T. Gibson, author of A Dowry of Blood, and other novels, came to me. She was working also as an agent at the time, and said, "There's an editor who wants to do this project, who really wants to find a writer to be involved with this book, and you are encouraged to reach out and to write a proposal." Um, and so when we came into the new year, that was exactly what I did, because it was not a book that necessarily would have occurred to me to write myself. Um, but what a joy it was to, write the proposal and think about, what are the drinks that we want to put right from the very beginning. Um, and what a joy to work with my editor, Brittany, and with all of the folks over at Running Press to make this happen, because it's just, it was the most fun, the most fun to write. To do the research, to have the excuse to say, all right, I'm done writing for the day. I'm gonna go play a game, and that's work. You know,
Hmm.
that's
Yes,
still
that's a write off. There we go.
exactly. Um, so it's just the gift of Bar Cart Bookshelf has been the many people that I've gotten to meet and work with as a result of that, and all sort of culminating here into my entree into the author scene myself.
Amazing. You mentioned that you had a couple lined up off the get
Mm,
as part of the proposal.
indeed.
Um, which ones were there, and did they all like which ones? I guess this question is going to be a couple fold here. What were they?
Mm.
Did you have them before the proposal, or did you have to come up with them quickly once you knew you were doing the proposal? And did any of them not make it?
Mm. So all the drinks that were in the proposal made it. And
Okay.
that was a nice thing. The first two drinks that I pitched were the Raindrop inspired by Sonic the Hedgehog, which is a riff on the classic 90s Lemon Drop, because it's a classic 90s game.
Yeah.
It's bright blue. It's got this really fun garnish with three lemon peel rings along the edge. So it's just
I love it.
that was what helped me to find the tone for the book. And then the Miles Edgeworth martini as well, which is a 50-50 martini with a bar
Okay.
spoon of Earl Grey tea syrup in there just to balance things out.
Ooh.
A little riff on a classic martini for one of my favorite characters. Uh, and then there was a snack that I included in the original proposal, which was the Stardew Valley cheese board. And that was sort of the thing that, for my editor, really helped her to see the vision and helped her to understand where I wanted to go with the book and what we wanted to do in our collaboration together. The Stardew Valley Cheese Board takes the four seasons of Stardew Valley, a game that I
Oh.
have to be very careful about when I play because if I start a new farm, then there go my next 3 weeks. I will be
Yeah.
in it. I'm
Oh,
gonna
oh. The number of times I
yeah.
have bought that game unnecessarily because I already own it elsewhere just so I could play again.
You can, and so for this cheese board, I wanted to help people think about the seasonality of the game and the products that are available that you can grow on your farm in each of the four seasons. And so we give ideas about how to take those seasonal products and really make them into something that you want to have as part of your spread when you're having a cocktail party at home. Yeah.
Wow. So what goes into build? I mean, I want to go what goes into building the book, but let's start with the cocktail end first. What like how do you approach these kind of projects?
We
Are you thinking game first? Are you thinking cocktail? Like you mentioned the ring drop being a version of lemon drop. Do you think I need a version of lemon drop? I need the version of old fashioned and back end that way? Or are you jumping in? Do you have like an Excel sheet of games? You're like which one feels like it's going to fit in and give me the variety I need?
it was a mix of approaches.
Mm-hmm.
So there was an initial list of games that I knew I wanted to talk about, and some of those didn't end up making it just as we wanted to, refine and get into. what would be the best mix altogether. But then there were also maybe not specific riffs, but styles of drink that I wanted to have. Like I wanted to make sure that I had a very classic 19th century style punch, which we have for the Dishonored series. I knew I wanted to do
Lovely.
some fizzes. I knew I wanted to do some things that were blue and some things that were green. And so it was sometimes I have this recipe that I know is going to be a really great recipe. Where is it going to best fit? But a lot of the time it was I had this games and I know what I want to talk about. I know I want to talk about Zero Escape, or Disco Elysium, or
Hmm.
what have you. And so what is going to be the flavor profile or the drinking style that's going to be best for this thing that I know I want to talk about.
Wow. Yeah. So with that and keeping those things in mind, how do you then approach writing a book on it and filling out the words to not just be recipes down the center? Like, I as someone who's not a writer
Yeah.
and barely a reader at times, like I imagine when you're approaching, something like a novel, uh, you start kind of you may outline it, but you're writing in the beginning and going on until you
Mhm.
get to the end.
Yeah.
Without a narrative through line, unless there's a narrative element, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Without a narrative through line in a cocktail book, how do you approach that kind of writing and making sure that everything still feels like a cohesive book in the end? Like, do you start
Mhm.
just at the ones you already have, or is it a beginning to end scenario for you as well?
No, it was a lot of I felt sort of liberated by not having a narrative that I had to like start in the beginning and there's cause and effect. And, I like narrative fiction. I also write narrative fiction. And I read constantly. But I
Yeah.
felt freed in the ability to like jump around. It allowed me to write the book much faster than I could have if I had to go, X leads to Y leads to Z. Because
Right.
if there were days where the recipes weren't flowing, then I could be, burying myself in fan wikis and, in research and in lore and work on the headwords, or I could be going back and doing some of the introductory material, helping people to find, their right cocktail tools and spirits. And so that allowed me to sort of keep the well, primed and ready to go, so that every day when I was sitting down to write, I knew there would be some portion of it that I could use to just get started. And then once the ball is rolling, then we can get the rest of the session going. And so that really, um, it was a very freeing sort of style to write in.
Wow. Did you get a lot of help as far as like local friends to taste tests? Yeah, are you sitting there like
Oh
variations?
yeah,
Like, all right, there's yeah. How did that? I'm sure people loved being on the other end of that.
yeah, yeah. I had several good friends who helped through the whole drafting process, and then probably the most fun part of it was after I had written the book. After we were all set, things were moving for my publisher, and our text was set. I already taste tested everything, but we needed to get reference images for the illustrator. And so we did photo day or photo weekend, and I had a whole bunch of friends over and made every single book, every single drink in the book.
Oh,
And
lovely.
we photographed them. I'm cranking, I'm in the weeds. I've always been a home bartender, not like someone who works at a cocktail bar. And even then,
Right,
you're not
right.
making them, you're not making a million martinis. You can crank out the G&T, boom, 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 boom. But getting all of these, photo ready, it was a marathon. Um, but fortunately, I
Whew.
had lots of friends around to make sure that my mind stayed sharp, so that I could keep making them, and make sure that my fridge didn't end up too full there. So that was just
Wow.
a really great experience as a sort of rounding part of the drafting process there. Uh,
Sounds like a real party. That sounds it's so
it
much
was,
fun. I'm jealous. I am not in the area. That's would have been good to be a part of. Um, I want to go back to Barkart for a little bit here. You've gone through a lot of books for that. Do you have a do you have a criteria? Like, is it about being inspired after having read a book, or are you in the kind of creator mindset of the moment I read something, I'm going to try to come up with something for it? No moment wasted.
yeah. Um, It's a mix. There is a lot of planning that goes
Mm-hmm.
into what I read next, to try and time things out. And I am very fortunate to, receive advanced copies and review copies of books. And so I do like to approach that with the mindset of what can I find here? And it's not necessarily the case that I always be. But I try because it's, 48, 50 drinks a year. And so you've got to hit more than you can miss, because, this is not my full-time job. This is not something that
Right, right.
necessarily pays the bills. And so there is I'm strategic in what I choose to read and to talk about. But there is a point where when I sit down to read something, I really go into it with the intention of finding what is in there. Um, on the plus side, I have very good taste. So we
There you go.
no. But it's also nice sometimes just to um get a little ahead of the game, or to plan to talk about like a cocktail book, pull something out of my libation library and talk about a classic, so that I can read something and have the blessed gift of not talking about it. Because I love,
Yeah.
love, love to talk about books. It's one of my great joys in this world, but it's also a gift to just enjoy something sometimes, and not
Right.
to talk about it, to keep it, close to
Yeah.
yourself.
You always find that the moment something enters the to-do list, it becomes a lot less fun.
Well,
When there's a bit of the pressure to get things, and I get it. It's always about that balance, because we all want the job. We all want our job to not feel like a job and be the thing we
sure.
love, but it's always a struggle to keep it from actually becoming the job. What are some of the lessons you feel like you've learned in the act of adapting, like specifically, like like what is the growth you've seen in yourself in this ability to dissect the essence of a piece of literature, or media and gaming in this case, and extract that feeling and put it into liquid form, right? Because the idea in the end is the drink you have is reminiscent of the thing you've read or the game you've played. Uh, and I'm sure that's a skill that has come over time.
Yeah. So when I started out, there were a number of books that I just thought to myself, this can't be a drink. And some of them, I still think that. Like, I think it would be wrong really, to do a drink on a book or a game where famine is sort of a key theme, because
That stands.
it's like balance with the celebratory nature of a cocktail. But when I started
Right.
out, there were a lot of like, I thought, oh, I can't really do some of these body horror books. They're just like, they're not well suited to drinks. And then I read a lot of books that I like. And I was like, well, I want to talk about this. And there's something in here. And so while I have not reread, for example, Seth Dickinson's The Trader Maru Cormorant, one of those books that I, way back 3 years ago thought I could do a drink for this book or this author. I haven't reread that yet, but I did read his latest novel, Exordia, and was able to find a drink in there. It's a book that I think would have been better suited to a perfume. It just had that real sort of fragrance quality to it. Um, Something that's like
Mm.
experimental and off-putting. Uh, but we were able to find a drink in that, and it's a drink that I enjoy and have made since. So you know, I've become braver, I think, in what I'm willing to adapt, and more experimental in some of the ingredients that I make myself. When I first started out doing Barker Bookshelf, I had just left Boston. I'd taken my job remote, and I never made my own orgeat before because it's this almond syrup. It's really, it's a one that a lot of people like to buy themselves, but I didn't want to wait that fall for orgeat, and so I just decided, all right, I'm gonna try it out, make it myself, and now for my own recipes, I exclusively use my own orgeat. I got into making shrubs and seaweed syrup, and all sorts of like
Ooh.
specific things for Bark Bookshelf, some of which then have shown up in this book, and some of which will hopefully be showing up in future work. So yeah, the growth I think has been in willingness to be more experimental, both with the cocktails and with the books that we talked about. We've tried, different sorts of things, adapting cat books of poetry, or collections of short
Mm-hmm.
stories, which are, a difficult thing to do compared to a novella or a novel where you have a larger group of texts really to work with and think about. Um, but that's not, very rewarding as well. Sort of rambling answer there for you.
No, no, no. It's great. That's great. That makes sense. It's great. Um, what do you like to read outside
Oh,
of what you do for Barker Bookshelf? Like what,
mhm.
where when we remove the business, and we'll still refer to Barker Bookshelf as a business here. When you just get down and cuddle down the book on a good day, what are you looking for?
Yeah. Um, I like variety. But like,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not going to talk about something, I like nonfiction. I like reading about natural history, books like Merlin Sheldrake's Entangled Life or Stephen Brissate's The Rise and Reign of Mammals have been favorites of mine in recent years. Um, but, at the end of the day, I am a reader of science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And that's the reason I talk about it all the time on Barcart Bookshelf. So the books that call to me on the shelf are, fantasy novels and science fiction and horror. Um, I like to mix it up sometimes with a little mystery thriller, but I like a book that is smart, um, that is insightful, that is generally more challenging than your typical fare. There are books that we don't talk about on Bar Cart Bookshelf for a variety of reasons, things that I think are just, they're hugely popular. And that's great.
Hmm.
But one, they don't need bio. Like there's no discoverability if you want to talk about, a book like Fortnite, for example. But
Right.
also it's not necessarily my taste. I like uh it's a little idiosyncratic, the taste that I had. But related things that are a little elevated. I like things that are with small publishers and small presses a lot of the time. I like things that are queer and have insights into the queer experience through the lens of the speculative. Um, and yeah, I like being able to feel a connection with an author, which I think can be harder to do when it's whatever Stephen King, um, who exists
Right.
sort of
Right.
in this upper echelon at this total remove from your experience as like the working reader and working writer. Um, so yeah, you know, I like things like Kalina. Um, and Jared Petacek's
Yeah. Fair.
The
Fair
West
enough.
Passage, which I read earlier this summer, or another summer favorite was Paolo Bacigalupi's Navola, um, which is a little different from my usual fare, but it has that through line of one of my interests, which is explorations of masculinity and how we construct that masculinity in art and in speculative literature, especially.
Wow. Do you think these proclivities you have towards the written medium, uh, do you feel like you have the same towards, granted, sometimes there's less of that in the gaming outside of maybe the indie space, but do you think you see a through line between the two mediums as you've now been making drinks on both
Mm.
mediums?
Yes and no. So I like a lot of
Okay.
narrative games, long narrative games like Ace Attorney, Zero Escape, that sort of thing. But I don't read a lot of cozy books. I don't like I don't
Mm.
go or gravitate towards things that are that softer, sort of lower stakes. It's a very popular and wonderful subgenre that lots of people enjoy. But when I'm sitting down to read a book, that's not necessarily the feeling that I want to have. When I'm playing a game, it's
You want
a
the stakes heightened.
sensation.
You want to be in it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a sensation that shifts because I love a lot of those sort of simulation style and sort of cozy games like Stardew Valley, um, or things
Hmm.
like Spiritfarer or Cozy Grove. For about 3 months last fall,
Yes.
I was sitting down, I was there with the bears in the grove every day at lunch. That was my little like lunchtime. We're gonna step away from the workspace and just go and hang out in Cozy Grove.
Oh, I love that.
Um, so there is
Oh,
there is a
beautiful.
difference, I think, in the taste that I have in books compared to games.
Fair enough. What about cocktails? You
Yeah.
make all sorts of them.
Mm.
What do you prefer when? it comes to your drink? Do you have a liquor preference? Do you have a style preference? Or are you really looking to hop between all formats?
No, I mean, I'm a dilettante. I like things changing with the season. Um, I
Okay.
like a lot of citrus, so I do a lot of shaken sours. I love that citrus zing, that lemon juice, that lime juice. That really is
Yeah.
probably the most consistent thing in what I do when I'm making a drink for myself. But then, in May, I want a Pinot, because my mint is growing, and I want a mint julep because my mint is growing, and I'm in Kentucky. I gotta have a mint julep. Um,
I mean,
and
naturally, yeah.
in
You don't want to get kicked
winter,
out. I get it.
exactly, it's a requirement here in the Commonwealth.
Right.
And in the winter, I want something that's going to be a little richer and heavier. So I drink a lot of maple rye old fashions in the fall and brandy Alexanders in the winter. But you couldn't push a brandy Alexander into my hands in July. I wouldn't. No, thank you. So I like
But fair enough.
I like the ability to change my drinking mood through the course of the year and through the course of the seasons to try and have something around that's going to work for whatever time of year it happens to be. And that ends up, I think, featuring into some of the ways that we make drinks in Bar Cart Bookshelf and to a certain degree in Cocktails and Consoles, even though I wrote it all over the course of the summer. We do have a lot of fall and winter drinks in there as well. I shifted into the mindset. Uh, and put
Yeah,
my
I had to really turn your AC up, close the
exact
windows down, really get
yeah.
yourself in the winter state of mind.
Wrap myself in a blanket. Uh, so
Whew.
yeah. But seasonality definitely plays a role. If you look at what's on my, you know, bar card, there's probably the highest number of bottles of um bourbon. Just this, I'm born
Okay,
and raised in Kentucky. I, you
you're in
gotta
the area.
I have that sipping whiskey, and that was sort of where I
Hmm.
first started making cocktails, but also a lot of rum. I have a great fondness for rum, and it's a category that sees a really wide array of variation, and so I think is an easy sort of spirit to collect. To have, rums that I really go to all the time as sort of my standard cocktail rums, but then also to have some things that are there on the bar cart for just when I'm in the mood for something a little funkier, a little grassier,
Yeah.
and in a different style.
I mean, as a former tiki file myself, I fully respect a love for all things rum. I do want to ask. I feel like it's an important question. Martinis,
The-
vodka or gin, and why is gin the right answer?
Oh, it's gin, of course. No, gin is the answer.
Good, good.
Yeah. So, perfect martini, my ideal martini, which is like mostly in the Miles Edgeworth rate. It's a fakey tasting martinis with um a few dashes of Oreo. It's got to be stirred, and with a twist of
Hmm.
lemon. So that's how I take my martini. That's how I made it. That's how I order it when I'm out on the towns. And I think that's really going to give you the best martini experience. You can't skimp on the vermouth, otherwise you're just drinking a long shot of gin, which is lovely, but we should call a spade a
Which is,
spade.
yeah, I was gonna say, it's not a
Yeah,
bad thing.
no, this is a great pleasure in life, but we can call
Yeah.
a spade a spade. So, yeah, I like
Yes,
I like a
valid.
50/50. And I think a 50-50 really hits at what that classic marquee should be. There's a wonderful poem by Ogden Nash, the American master of light verse. It's called A Drink with Something in It. And one of the verses is about martini. There's something about a martini, a tingle remarkably pleasant, a mellow martini. I wish that I had one present. There's something about a martini or the dining and dancing. And to tell you the truth, it's not the vermouth. I think that perhaps it's the gin. Uh, and that yellow, that mellow martini, that tells you that you gotta have enough vermouth in there to give it that bit of color, you know.
Right, that scans. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It needs
But
to be
in the
offset
book,
somehow. Yes.
we do also, because very famously, James Bond likes his martini wrong. We do have the Shaken
Yes.
vodka martini in honor of Goldeneye. And I really enjoyed getting to talk about the sort of James Bond history there as well, because that's one of those, like, when you're a cocktail guy, you've got to have this affection for that. Um, and so even if it is not the way that
Yeah.
I order a martini,
Lillet Blanc in a martini I enjoy,
yeah.
but shaken not stirred was the dumbest fucking line in history.
Well, it's the problem of being too cool. You know, you get this guy in Casino Royale who's supposed to be out of his element, who's rough around the edges and is trying to fit in with upper crust, Europeans, as like bloke from, England. And so of course he orders his martini roll, thinking that he's going to be sort of suave and cosmopolitan. But Ian Fleming, master that he was, said, no, I'm going to illustrate something about this character by having to order his martini wrong. Everybody loves James Bond, and now everybody thinks that this like super spy is something more than an affect and a persona, and he's too cool. And now everybody wants to have their martini shaken, not stirred.
It's wild. It's wild. It's funny to think about the history that way. 'Cause I mean, I knew the martini was wrong, but I didn't realize that was the actual intent of the character was to purposefully get it wrong, which I think only makes the fact that the way it's hit the zeitgeist that much better.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite little bits of cocktail lore and trivia that I love to trot it out at parties.
That's great.
we
Well, we're getting towards the final minutes here of our chat, but I want getting back into the book. I was curious: are there any cocktails, or more specifically, any games that you wish you put in there that you weren't able to get into the book this time around?
Oh, I had a long list of games in my notebook. I mean, we had it really was a limiting factor. The contract for the book was 50 to 75 drinks, and we hit in at 75, because I was just like, there are so
Wow.
many things I want to talk about. And so yeah, there are games that didn't get into the book, and that I would love, in the future to talk about in, I don't know, a companion book or in an anniversary edition or something like that. Things like Frogger. I've got a little, scrawled note about how to do a drink for Frogger in my notebook, or getting some creme de banane for Donkey Kong. Because there were a lot of classic games that we could talk about, but you can't talk about all of them. And there were
Yeah.
a lot of techniques as well that you could talk about, but you can't talk about all of them. Um, so things like Donkey Kong and Frogger. I would love to go back and do some more Supergiant games. We were only able to feature one from the studio, Hades, which is, an absolute favorite of mine, but it would have been a lot of fun
Fantastic.
to, go and do Transistor or Bastion. Um, I think that would have been something I'd have enjoyed thinking about more. But, that's
Is there a
just
world in which we get
everybody's got
a bar cart game shelf?
maybe. That's certainly it would be something that I would enjoy as a change up from my usual sorts of projects. And I know that when Hades 2 leaves early access and comes out, for everyone, like there goes whatever free time I have for the
Oh yeah.
next few whiles. So there will I can say with almost absolute certainty that I will find myself talking about Hades 2 because I will not have read anything for 2 weeks because I'll have been I'll have been in it and playing the game. Um, so while the game content on my channel is going to be drawn from the book for a while, just to, give people demonstrations of what is already available, down the line, I certainly would enjoy getting to go beyond, and maybe if we sell enough copies, if we get, the book to be popular enough, then hopefully they'll let me pull out that list of games that I've got in my notebook and do a direct sequel companion book.
Well, let's fight for it. Enough copies sold, we can get Cocktails and Consoles 2 Tournament Edition ready to go in people's laps. Elias, where can people, now that is, once this is aired, the book will be available. Where can people find your book, and where can people find you?
Yeah, so the book is available wherever books are sold. Mostly physical copies, I believe, are here in the US and Canada, but UK and further abroad. Let people know, talk about it, let folks know that you want it, and it will be available in ebook as well, wherever books are sold. So if you're shopping Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local indie, I love my local indie, Carmichael's bookstore, which is where signed copies will be available. That's all a great spot to, find a copy for yourself, and as a gift, it's a great gift book. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky. My handle on all three of those platforms is at Elias Eells, ELIASEELLS, and on YouTube at Barcart Bookshelf, where every week we have a new book or that game, as we've certainly done several demonstrations at this point, that we are adapting into a fresh new cocktail or mocktail.
Fantastic, guys. Check it out wherever books are sold. Cocktails and Consoles now on sale. Easy enough to pick up. Elias, man, thank you so much for hopping on, for chatting with me. Guys, if you're watching, please be sure subscribe to the video, because Elias is a YouTuber. He knows. That's basically your currency at this point. That and video likes. You can hit that thumbs up button as well while you're at it. Until next time, thank you so much for checking it out. You can follow me at Boss Monster Kaiju everywhere but Twitter, because I can't have nice things. It's Boss Monsta Kaiju with an STA at the end there. Until next time, stay cool, stay hip, stay heavy. Good night.